Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Guitar Talk. I'm your host, Mike Higgins, and on this show we like to talk about music. We talk about guitars a lot, of course, but we also like to feature piano players, bass players, just all sorts of instruments and genres of performance. And we hope you're coming away learning a little something, especially about the vast amount of local talent that exists right here in New England. It never ceases to amaze me how this little pocket of southeastern New England is so rich in talent. And today is no exception to that, trust me. Today's guest has recorded with Duke Robillard. He was a member of Roomful of Blues. He's played with Anson Funderburgh, Cheryl Arena, Tommy Ferraro, Roger Cerisi and the All-Stars. It would actually be a lot easier to just list the people that he hasn't played with than to try to list everyone that he has. So we'd like to welcome Matt McCabe to the show. Welcome aboard, Matt.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for joining us.
My
So
pleasure.
where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in England
Oh,
because I had an American mother and an English father. But I grew up mostly in the Boston area.
yep.
Once in a while, we would go back to England for a year. So I did do a little school over there, but mostly Boston area. But I spent a lot of my earlier music career in Providence.
Oh,
So I know all those guys, Providence, all the Rhode Island guys from way back.
I've said this before, for such a little postage stamp of a state,
Absolutely.
the
I know.
talent that has come out of Providence is so extraordinary, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and surrounding areas too, like Woonsocket with Dave McKenna and
Dave
Duke.
McKenna, yeah.
And Duke Robillard was born in Woonsocket too.
So you were around in the early days of Roomful and
Yeah, I mean
Kenny
after I
Lyons and all those
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
and when Chris Stovall Brown was in Rhode Island. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
When after I did play with all the guys in Boston and I started a band in New Hampshire, a bunch of us around 75, 76 moved to Rhode Island.
ah,
And we joined up with people like Rob Nelson and Bob Soit and John Packer
yeah.
and we ended up doing like a year or two with Jimmy Rogers from
Wow.
the original Muddy Waters band.
Yeah.
And played around with New England with him. That would have been 77, 78, around there.
Yeah, that must have been an exciting time to be able to. Actually, that time period, when you think about the amount of gigs and the variety of gigs and music that existed in New England back then, I mean, we were working 7 nights a week.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then we started going up to Canada where we would play like 42 nights in a row.
Wow.
Because clubs would hire you for 6 days, and then they would talk you into playing on the 7th day, the one day off. So you would play every single night you were up there.
Yeah. That's exciting.
That was with a band called Blue Lights that had Rob Nelson, Carl Querford, who I ended up playing with in Roomful of Blues.
Wow. So what year did you join Roomful?
Well, that was later. That was in the 90s.
Okay.
That was after I went to Texas.
Oh,
Matter of fact, they picked me up in Dallas. So I went right from one bus right onto the other bus.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great to be able to do that. What were some of your early influences and styles of music? Was it blues right away?
Well, it was blues right away, but also jazz right away. Because I come from a big family, 9 kids, and my older brother was heavily into jazz, and my father was into jazz he was an expert in classical music.
Wow.
But so we had all that stuff in the house. And then when I got to Rhode Island, I got into all the real super early R&B stuff from the late 40s, early 50s. Mm-hmm. That Roomful of Blues was playing, Buddy Johnson,
Yeah, they really had that stuff out there.
Wynoni Harris, all that kind of stuff.
Nobody carried the flag for that music better than them during that time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think it's because of them that music continued to stay alive and vibrant, because they just kept it out there. And, the level of musicianship in that band was always so good. No matter who the lineup was, it was just wonderful.
Yeah, well, they predated all these bands that really cashed in on that
They
stuff.
sure did.
As a matter of fact, there's a guy who was a big star up in Canada named Colin James. a guitar
Oh, yeah.
player.
Yeah, I know who that
And
is.
when I was in Roomful of Blues, we backed him up. And when Duke went up there later, who I played with Duke for 4 or 5 years, and when Duke went up there later, they interviewed him. They said, "Why did Roomful of Blues copy Colin James?"
Oh, man, he must have about fell off a chair at
Oh,
that
he was
point.
like, "Well, I was playing this stuff in Roomful of Blues before Colin James was born."
Right.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's unbelievable. You know, jazz and blues is such a wonderful marriage of music. And when you hear Duke in particular, the way he can blend it, you know, and the turnarounds that he used, when you combine those styles,
Yeah.
it's such an important tool to have in the box. You know, I know guys that are hardcore, muddy or whatever, and they don't dabble in jazz.
Yeah.
For me, I always felt that you were limited as a musician if you didn't at least have some basic working knowledge of diatonic harmony and how the turnarounds worked.
absolutely.
And to blend the two is a
The
magnificent
more harmony,
thing.
the more anything you know about
The better.
music, the better. There's this strange split that goes on that's even more stark in Europe than it is over here, where it's like it's either blues and old jazz or it's modern jazz. There's like this cutoff date
Yeah, yeah,
where it's not like the new guys, it's everything after Miles Davis.
right.
And then the guys before that, it's blues and jazz before 1945, which it's all ridiculous. I mean, it's all great music.
It is ridiculous when you put it in that context. And I remember in the 70s when jazz and rock started to come together and you had fusion music.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
some of that early stuff was very interesting. I thought that what Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock were doing early on was very interesting. Some of it later just kind of turned into a chops festival, some of the stuff that I was
Yeah,
hearing.
plus when it gets where everything's electric and synth and
Right.
all that stuff.
You lost me at that point.
And there's also a tendency to dilute styles
Yes.
when you, I mean, if you're an incredible musician like Herbie Hancock, but the thing is, everybody else follows it. And
And
the
it
real-
waters down.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that is about creating a market.
Yes.
When you create a market for basically anything, you're diluting the product, whether it's music or your mother's strawberry jam. You know what I mean? But I mean, it does work when you get, someone like Herbie Hancock.
Right.
He's a genius, so that's a little different.
You know, and it was those guys that got me to listen to Oscar Peterson
Yeah,
and make me go backwards
yeah, absolutely.
and
yeah.
find the earlier guys, and then, and I'd hear a fusion guitarist like Larry Coryell
Yeah,
or one of those guys. They'd talk about who they learned from, and then I'd go back and listen to Barney Kessel, Joe Pass,
yeah.
and those guys and find them when they were gigging. Joe I got to see a few times. I never
Oh,
got to
that's
see
great.
Barney.
That's great. I got
But-
some great stuff with him on record.
And I see it and then the same thing with the blues, how in the 80s after Stevie hit, all the rockers jumped on board.
Well, even before that,
Before it.
when the English got a hold of it, and I can say that because I was born in England. But I mean, they rocked it up.
Yes.
And the people over here, because of the racial split, most of us didn't know about real blues, and so many of us in the late '60s got turned on to blues by Eric Clapton and all those
Cream.
guys, and the smart ones of us went backwards
That's right. That's
because
right.
we were just teenagers then.
They at that point they souped it up, but they still showed respect
Oh yeah,
to the masters.
I'm not saying what they played wasn't
Right. They
I mean,
changed it by virtue of just they're different. They came from different influences and they cranked up those Marshall amps. And,
they didn't come from the black American
Right.
culture.
That's right.
I mean, that's what you really got to go back. But they did listen to it.
They sure did. They sure did. So I know lately you've been keeping a pretty full schedule. You worked last night with Cheryl Arena's band.
Yeah.
Who else you working with these days?
Of course, Roger.
Roger Cerisi, who was a guest on the show. Yeah.
That band features Rob Nelson on guitar, Barry Fleischer on tenor, and then Racky Thomas I work a lot with Racky, with Pete Henderson, and I get featured a lot in that band too. It's great. He lets me play a lot.
Gives you some space, yeah.
And then Tommy, I do some once in a while. Sugar Ray.
That's where I first met you and saw you. You did the Sugar Ray gig with Tommy at the Sandbar.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you guys sounded great.
And also Sugar Ray, he'll throw me a gig every now and then. I'm doing a thing coming up with Muddy Waters Jr. there, with Rick Russell and Bob Worthington. And
That should be a great gig.
when I was on the road, I played with just about everybody.
Yep.
But I would probably take too much time to go through all that stuff. But I toured a lot with Sam Myers, which was a lot of fun.
Really, Sam Myers.
Well,
fantastic.
he was Anson's. Me and Sam basically joined the band at the same time. Sam a little before me, and he was a great singer, probably the best blues harmonica player alive.
Wow.
At the end of his life.
Yeah, that's saying something. That's
Yeah.
saying something. Anson, to me, he's the king of understatement. He can
Yeah.
get so much emotion and music across with a couple of phrases. I really admire that in him, and you can tell that should the moment arise, he can cut loose with anybody. But he serves the band. Which leads me into my next question, because you've had the opportunity to accompany so many of these great people. What's your advice on really being a great sideman?
Well, for guitar players, don't noodle through somebody else's solo.
That's a bad thing to do.
Because a lot of guitar players, I'm guilty of this myself too on a piano, they kind of forget and keep playing because a lot of the blues stuff is ensemble stuff. And you just got to be mindful of the other soloist.
Yes.
And if I find myself noodling through somebody's solo, I go, oops,
Yeah.
and
Get back to the chords.
try to lay back.
Yeah.
And if you're a piano player, along with not playing through other people's solos, try to find the gaps in the vocals and put some fills in there, because that's in blues that's really needed.
Yes. Especially, I notice it too, especially in what's referred to as the march.
Yeah.
You got to get that ga-gunk, ga-gunk, ga-gunk,
Yeah,
ga-gunk. But
yeah.
there's the little thingies, the little flourishes that happen
Yeah.
in between those that fill it up.
And if you got a real hip guitar player, you'll kind of trade those fills.
Yes.
Like on the first gap, he'll do it. On the next gap, I'll do it. That kind of thing.
And to the untrained, the march would seem like an easy thing. But when you go to do it, and you have to be mindful that the tempo has to be rock solid.
That's so important on those marches. And a lot of
When
people...
you go to do the fills, your groove has to be solid. You can't lose the tempo
Oh,
at that
absolutely.
point. If you listen to Jimmy Vaughan and the people that are the kings of that, and Anson,
Yeah.
you realize it's really an art to do a
Well,
great
those
job
guys,
in a march.
they listened to Eddie Taylor, who was a master of that. And, of course, they listened to Magic Sam and Buddy Guy and Freddie King and
Yep.
Albert King and BB, of course, Otis Rush.
Did you ever get to play with Freddie?
No, I did. I played with Otis Rush,
Wow.
Albert Collins, Buddy Guy, Albert King.
What an entertainer Albert Collins was.
Yeah.
He was the whole package.
I was doing a gig in Houston with Anson, and Albert Collins' whole band came in, and the entire band just came in and took over the stage.
Wow.
And Anson said, okay, everybody got off except for me because they didn't have a piano player. And those guys were maniacs. They played like all out, blasting,
Yeah, yeah.
fast. I was like, whoa! And I just had to go,
And Albert had those quad reverb amps that just
Yeah.
decapitated anybody sitting in front
they
of them.
just wanted me to go crazy like them. So I said,
That's not-
okay.
Who was the bass player in Albert's band?
Oh, God, there were two brothers back when I first saw them. The Bruton brothers, I think it was. And one of them played bass, and the other one was either backup guitar or the drummer. But they were with them for a long time.
I think it was the drummer.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
probably right.
He was great. I used to love watching that band. I probably got to see him 2 or 3 times, maybe 4, and that was just one of the most entertaining bands.
Absolutely.
Every guy in there was a strong player. He had that one tenor sax guy too, who'd been with him forever and ever.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
I also got to play with Anson. I got to play with
Yep.
both. Well, actually, Stevie Ray with Anson and Jimmy with Roomful.
Wow.
And that was, I remember when those guys first came out to Rhode Island and Boston when nobody knew who they were, like 76 or something like that. They weren't famous or anything.
Right, just touring guys trying to make a living.
But the Thunderbirds, they sounded great. You remember when they first came up here?
I think I got introduced to them, I'm going to say 1980, 82.
Okay. They still hadn't had the hits then.
They hadn't had
Yeah.
any hits yet, actually. Then they broke with that single, Tough Enough,
Yeah.
later on in the 80s.
Yeah.
But I
yeah, not
already
too much later.
Yeah.
Probably around 83 or something like that.
Yep.
4, maybe somewhere in there.
Yep, great stuff. So you recorded an album called Blue Mood with Duke.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that recording project.
Okay, that was years before, like 20 years before I was in Duke's band, or 25 years. Let me see, 92.
Yep.
92, 15 years, I guess. Anyway, whatever. Paul Murphy was in that band.
Oh, man.
And that was where I actually met Marty Ballou at that session. That would have been maybe 93, 92, somewhere in there. Who else was on there? Oh, was it Jeff? No, because
Who played bass on that record?
Marty Ballou.
Marty, of
that's
course,
That's
right.
where I met him. Duke, Paul, Marty. Geez, I can't remember who the drummer was.
So was Paul playing with Duke by that point?
Yeah, he was in the
He
band.
was in the band. That's when he
Yeah.
joined Duke.
And that was a fun record because it was all cool stuff. And
Yeah.
he was doing some stuff like he did back in the 70s and some T-Bone and also all kinds of stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, he always had a deep well to draw from and still
Oh,
continues
absolutely.
to.
I mean, if I tried to name all the guitar players, I could name a lot of the guitar players that influenced Duke, but I probably would miss like 20 of them.
Right,
Because
right.
he's got so many.
Yeah, I remember, I think the first time I ever saw Duke live. No, I think the second time I saw him, he had just formed the Pleasure Kings. The
Okay.
original lineup with Onright and DeQuattro.
That's too bad because you missed the
early years.
The early 70s were something else.
I heard about him all the time, but I saw him open for BB at a place called Center Stage in Rhode Island, one of the first gigs they did. And I remember thinking when they were done, how is BB going to follow that? I was that amazed. I was just astounded. The turnarounds, the voicings, the harmony, the stuff that came out of that trio floored me.
Yeah.
But then, of course, BB's band came out, and I was like, you know,
Yeah.
they
Well,
were phenomenal.
BB liked Duke.
He sure did.
I remember seeing a show at the Channel where it was the Earl, the Duke, and the King. It was Ronnie Earl's band,
Wow.
BB King's band, and Duke Roblard's band, and then BB King's band. And they all got up and jammed, and it was interesting. But the funny thing was, I stayed out of this, but 3 piano players like stampeded the keyboard because they all had to get up there. And at one point, Anthony was playing, and Dave Maxwell got up there, sat down here, backed up, and shoved Anthony right off the
Whoa.
bench. That's how bad those guys wanted to be up there.
That is awesome. What a great story.
It was funny though.
Dave Maxwell, another fine musician, gone too soon.
Yeah, well, he actually got me started on playing blues.
Really?
Because when all those guys were coming to my house in the right when I was still in high
He
school.
had the gig with Ronnie for a period of time, didn't he?
Oh, I can't remember, probably. But I mean, all those guys, Maxwell, Ronnie, a great guitar player named Sean Benjamin, who just recently died, who ended up out in Nebraska, played with Magic Slim a lot. Keith Dunn, a singer, Stanley Steele, a great harp player. All these guys were coming over to my house and jamming. And Maxwell ended up giving me some key Otis Spann pointers. I mean, really, the foundation of Otis
Yeah.
Spann. And that really got me going.
It's funny how one or two lessons from the right person
One
can
lesson was-
change everything.
Absolutely. It was unbelievable
It
how
really
much.
can.
Because I had been listening to Spann tons. And once he gave me those just little pointers, all of a sudden I said, oh, wow, that sounds like Spann. I was like, that's great.
After I heard Duke, when he started with the Pleasure Kings, believe it or not, he had a small ad in the Rhode Island New Paper. Remember the New Paper?
Yeah, yeah.
Guitar students wanted. And it had Duke and his phone number. Gring, I call that right away. He lived in an apartment above the Columbus Cinema, downtown Providence. So I went over his place, and I thought I could play blues, but I really couldn't yet, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you doing here? You're not going from the 5 to the 4 to the 1. What is this stuff?
Yeah.
So he showed me that little Count Basie tree, that little triad of chords, that dun, 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 that little minor 7 to diminished
Yeah.
back to the major.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, cha-ching, money chords just came flowing into my hands, you know.
That's a great
Then he
feeling.
showed me another 2-5. And from there, I wandered off. I think I had 2 lessons with him in that apartment. And I didn't see him again for years and years. And one day, a few years ago, we wandered into one of my solo gigs on acoustic. Him and Lorraine come in. Porticello's was the name of the restaurant. And I said, Duke, wow, I can't believe you're here. When I was done playing that night, I said, I want to show you something. I never forgot this. And I played those 2 passages for him, and he smiled. I said, you changed my life, man, when you showed me those little chord changes, you know? But point being, like David sitting down and showing you
Yeah.
some of that stuff.
Well, later on, of course, I studied with a jazz master up. You ever hear of Charlie Banakis?
Oh, yeah.
Well, he was sending me tapes, and I was on the road from Roofle, and he was sending them to like my hotels on the road
Wow.
with lessons on the tapes. So I had quit drinking at that point. So I was in the back of the bus with my little keyboard going crazy on these Banakis things.
And that's what he did, right? It was a correspondence course
Yeah.
with Charlie.
Well, if you didn't,
For the guys that were gigging.
if you didn't do that, you had to go on a waiting list for 5 years.
That's right.
It was Maxwell that told me, call him up, tell him you're on the road, and he'll hook you right up.
You know who Mike Stern is? Great.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he studied with Charlie too
Yeah,
for a long time. Everybody was on that list. They wanted to
But
get with
you
him.
know, I don't want to trash anybody, but the guy plays like 1 billion notes.
He sure does. If he got paid by the note, he'd be a millionaire.
You want him to kind of, hey, just groove for a little bit, will you please?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure he's a fantastic musician.
He
Don't
is.
get
A
me
lot
wrong.
of harmony in there, a lot of information in the playing.
Yeah.
I don't have those kind of chops. I never really aspired to do that.
Well, it was really the harmony that I liked the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the exercises. I have some chops, but you learn so much about harmony, which is so important in every kind of music.
Yep. That's the key. What are some upcoming gigs? You got the Muddy Junior thing coming up.
Yeah,
Where
I'm
else
doing,
can folks see you?
13, 14, 15, I'm doing one with him in Hartford, one festival up in Maine, and one closer to home. I can't remember where.
Awesome.
I got some festivals I'm doing with Racky. I think I'm doing a couple of festivals with Roger.
Mm-hmm.
I got something coming up with Tommy at the
With the Vintage
At the
Rhythm and
pub
Blues
on Park.
Ensemble? Oh, at the pub?
yeah coming
Great.
up. I wish I had brought my schedule with me because I can't remember any dates unless I look at my calendar.
I'm the same way, you know, when you
Yeah.
get a full schedule, you just wake up in the morning and say, where am I playing today?
Yeah.
Share a cool road story with us.
Oh boy. Well, Sam, there's so many. I remember I was in Minnesota and Sam was going to be on the radio, and I got this inspiration because I knew Sam was going to say something funny because he was legally blind, and me and him were really close friends. I mean, we were drinking buddies. I still drank back then.
Yep.
And I knew he was going to say something. He screwed up a lot of things because he couldn't see. But some of his translations were funny. So I called my sister. I said, Sam's about to be on the radio. I know he's going to say something funny. And so we were doing this movie with Ed Harris and Madeline Stowe. And so I put the phone to the radio. I said, I know he's going to say something good. And he said, so Sam, who's in the movie? He goes, Ed Harris and Madeline Stove. And my sister cracks up. She goes, how did you know he's going to say that? I said, I know him.
Yeah, yeah.
She ended up meeting him later when we played in Boston.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But we did so much traveling in that band. Just, all over North America, all over Europe, just nonstop.
That's awesome.
Even more than we did in Roomful.
When you went over to Europe, did you find, is it true that they just embrace blues and traditional stuff over there even better than they do here?
Yeah, but when I was with Hanson, we did some festivals down south where the audience was like 80% black. Big festivals, 30,000 people.
Wow.
So, I mean, it really depends where you go a lot.
Yeah.
Blues is still big down south.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, there is a steady, you can make money over there easier than you can here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why so many people go over there.
In venues around here are fewer and further between. It can
You can't play during the week anymore.
Nope.
So you can't put a tour together.
That's right. And the dollar amounts aren't what they were for the larger bands because it's harder to get people out on the weekends to fill a club of any size. And if you even want $10 at the door, people get reluctant. But
when we went out with Hanson, we were doing 2 months, tons of one-nighters, and playing almost every weeknight if we weren't driving over a weeknight.
Yep.
All over the country. And you can't do that now.
It's hard, but people can still come out and see Matt. So find him on Facebook and go out and support this music, folks, because there's not a lot of guys left at this level that are still doing it on a regular basis and playing with all the greats. So, Matt, thank you for joining us
My
today
pleasure.
and
Thank you,
sharing
Mike.
some of this incredible history that you've got with all these great musicians here in New England and around the globe, actually. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Guitar Talk. We'll be seeing you. God bless you.